1 minute I'm baking cookies, and the next minute I'm fighting for my life, and my whole life has been turned upside down.
Helene is now the deadliest mainland storm to hit the U.S. since Katrina. A week later, thousands sifting through what's left of their personal belongings. I'm Ellison Barber in for Gadi, Schwartz, and this is Stay Tuned Now. Hurricane Helene was extraordinarily deadly. The storm is now responsible for the deaths of over 220 people across 6 states. People like Marcia and Jerry Savage in South Carolina. The grandparents were teenage sweethearts and married for more than 50 years. A tree crashed through the roof of their home and killed them both. They were reportedly found hugging each other in bed. The family says the coroner had to pull them apart. But along with such heartbreaking stories, there are stories of hope. Uplifting ones, like this one from the Faulkner family in Tennessee. They say they thought their dog Athena was swept away with their house. But last night, a miracle of sorts. The Faulkners saw a video on social media of their beloved dog being rescued by a local fire department. Turns out Athena managed to survive by waiting in a treetop over 20 feet off the ground. The Faulkners are one of countless families who've lost almost everything in the storm. As people try to dig out of the muck, many are searching for little things: family photos, social security cards, birth certificates. A majority of the power is back on in Florida, but across the other states hit hard by Helene, close to 700,000 people are still without power. That, plus spotty service in many areas, continues to create communication hurdles. And all of this damage could cost upwards of $34 billion to repair, according to Moody Analytics. Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Kathy Park in Newport, Tennessee. Kathy, we mentioned people are searching for basic forms, really, of identification. When people can't prove who they are, it can be more challenging to access government aid. What can you tell us about supply deliveries in Tennessee right now, especially in those more isolated areas? And in terms of people who are like, hey, we don't have an ID to tell you who we are they able to access the aid they need from the federal government in particular?
Yeah, so Ellison, good evening. It's dark right now, but around me, I'm surrounded by mountains. We're in the heart of Appalachia, so there is dense forest in this area. And as you mentioned, a lot of remote communities that still are cut off from the basic essentials like running water and electricity. But fortunately, over the last several days, a lot of resources have been pouring into this area. The Tennessee National Guard stepping in and actually airdropping some items near these communities so that people can reach them. But I spoke with the Newport mayor not too long ago, earlier today, and he said that they are working around the clock, trying the best they can to kind of make these makeshift roads to get to these individuals, because in a lot of these communities, there's only one road in, one road out, and those roads, bridges have all washed away. But the good news is it seems like those resources are slowly starting to funnel into those communities.
And Kathy, NBC has been reporting about the people, at least 4 of them, who worked at a Tennessee plastics factory and died during the storm. A lot of questions about whether or not they were allowed to leave when Helene hit. What's the latest in terms of that?
So that has certainly been a controversial issue in nearby Unicoi County. The impact plastics facility is located in Irwin, and right now several state agencies are reviewing the allegations that employees may not have been allowed to leave in time to escape the floodwaters. But the CEO of Impact Facilities actually released a statement this week and said, look, we are following the protocols as far as the review process goes. He's saying that they let employees know at least 45 minutes before the floodwaters hit. He also mentioned that no employees died on their property as the floodwaters began rushing in. But I can tell you, just having been in that community and just seeing the grief and pain with so many family members suffering from loss, and they're also looking for missing family members as well.
And Kathy, it is always worth looking for the helpers in times like this. I know you and your team, our other colleagues who are there, you guys do such a great job of that. I understand the one that you met and came across today is a name people know pretty well, right? Dolly Parton?
Yeah, the Queen of Country was right here in Newport, Tennessee. If you don't know this, she actually grew up in East Tennessee, nearby Sevier County. So this was a bittersweet homecoming for her in a way, because she said she would come to Newport often when she was young, and she has fond memories here, but it's crushing and devastating to see the suffering that's going on. And that's why she said she is committed to rebuilding this community back stronger. Take a listen.
Who knew in our little part of the country here, where I was born and raised, just right down the road, that we would have this kind of devastation. This is a time for me to step up again, for all of us to step up and do what we can.
And Ellison, Dolly actually committed to donating $1 million from her own bank account with the ongoing relief efforts. And we should also point out we are standing in a Walmart parking lot. She's also working with Walmart to continue pumping out these resources for those who need it. There are several water pallets over to my right. We've seen several people coming in, picking those up, because running water is still has not been restored for much of this community and a lot of these affected areas as well. And also behind me, there are mobile showers, we're told, laundry facilities. So all these things are being utilized pretty regularly for those who are still cut off from water.
Kathy Park in Newport, Tennessee. Thank you. We appreciate it. One of the worst affected areas of the storm is Asheville, North Carolina. A food bank there that typically serves 150,000 meals a month was just completely wiped out. NBC News Today co-host Al Roker traveled south to see the need firsthand. Al?
Get us a good out picture here.
From high above, we toured the devastation caused by Helene.
Thank you for everything you're doing.
FEMA inviting us along as they met and thanked first responders.
So it looks like most of the homes in Old Fort are actually impacted.
But this is just like one county.
This is just one county.
This has been an unprecedented, devastating storm for the people of Western North Carolina. One of the hardest hit locations, Swannanoa, part of the greater Asheville area.
These are two of the trailers that are left. I think 3 are just completely disappeared.
Walking a road they've driven for more than 2 decades, CEO Claire Neal and longtime co-worker Lisa Reynolds setting eyes for the first time on what used to be the Manna Food Bank headquarters.
40 years of food out between that space.
We lost our entire facility, all of the food in it, all of our equipment, our computers.
Founded in 1983, the Manna Food Bank serves 150,000 people every month, moving over 70,000 pounds of food each day to 16 counties in Western North Carolina. And like much of Asheville, it was destroyed. The historic flooding taking everything.
You're all set.
But amidst the devastation, Claire Neal and her army of volunteers are unbowed.
Manna Food Bank has never been a building. We have always been this vast collection of people that care about our neighbors.
They opened up this makeshift pop-up location, and despite personal hardships, are working to do what they can. Your volunteers were people who were also directly affected. I know a lot of them lost homes, lost their livelihoods.
It's just so incredibly inspiring that people could lose so much and still turn around and want to be there for other people.
What is it that is the greatest need right now?
Our biggest need is water. After that, people need shelf-stable food.
Stories of a community coming together at every turn. Everyone pitching in.
There you go. All right, do you need baby wipes or anything?
New diapers. It's just very surreal. It's hard to put into words. You see everything going around you. It's just, it's hard to absorb.
Matt Manning from Memphis, Tennessee, drove 12 hours to help. So you just decided, you thought, these folks need this?
Absolutely. It's, I think it's everybody's duty to kind of do something.
Do you think this is going to serve as a wake-up call?
I think with the continued changes we're seeing, we have to rebuild stronger.
These storms are going inland, and they're causing, in many cases, more damage inland than they are actually on the coast. Is this the new normal?
I think it is, Al. That's what we're seeing in all of these storms.
Keep us in your prayers. We're resilient. We will come back. It's just going to take a while.
That resiliency, a hallmark of this area.
Manna Food Bank has been serving these 16 counties in western North Carolina for 40 years, and we know that's not going to end here.
Our thanks to Al Roker for sharing that story. Meanwhile, multiple studies are finding that Hurricane Helene was much more intense than it should have been because of climate change. NBC's national climate reporter and meteorologist Chase Kane breaks it down.
Before Helene, other hurricanes brought devastating floods hundreds of miles inland. Ida in 2021, Irene in 2011, even decades earlier in 1969.
Hurricane Camille struck the Gulf Coast of Mississippi.
Category 5 Camille brought nearly as much rain to the Appalachians as Helene, and 75% of those deaths happened from flooding in Virginia.
And that's prompted some to dismiss the science that shows clear links between climate change and Hurricane Helene, saying, well, this has happened before. But it's actually pretty basic atmospheric physics, and that's why we were able to confidently report on the climate influence of Helene, even as the storm made landfall.
The flood damage from hurricanes is larger because of climate change.
Freddie Otto is the lead scientist at World Weather Attribution, and on Tuesday, they'll release a full analysis showing how much more intense climate change made Helene. That report follows two others from Climameter in Europe and the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, projecting that Helene dropped between 20 and 50% more rain because of the consequences of burning fossil fuels.
I think even without climate change, Hurricane Helene would have been a very damaging hurricane. But that kind of extra punch that you get from the addition of climate change and those warmer waters and warmer air temperatures, it's just an extra punch. And we don't want an extra punch. An extra punch means more destruction, higher death tolls, more damage, higher cost.
Sierra Peterson isn't just a paleoclimatologist at the University of Michigan. She's also a mother, part of the group Science Moms, and worries how burning more oil and gas will further supercharge extreme weather. The most recent National Climate Assessment projects the same region Helene hit the hardest will also see the greatest rise in extreme precipitation.
I've been a climate scientist for longer than I've been a mom, but since becoming a mom, it makes it much more tangible, and you really realize that people alive today will be experiencing these severe impacts that will just be getting worse over the coming decades.
In total, Helene dropped 40 trillion gallons of rain, enough to cover the entire state of North Carolina in 3.5 feet of water. And scientists agree it would have been much less if not for climate change.
I mean, we've had floods, but nothing like this.
And NBC's national climate reporter Chase Kane joins us now. I mean, Chase, you acknowledged in your report that some people are dismissive of reporting like this, and often the rebuttal is, well, we've had hurricanes many times before. This isn't because of climate change. So give us the science, and if you could explain it to me like I'm 5. How do we know when a hurricane is caused by or more severe because of climate change?
Ellison, the simplest way to think about this is if you have a cup of hot coffee, of hot tea, there's steam coming off of it, right? We're all familiar with that. That's essentially the same process. That evaporation is what is fueling hurricanes. So the warmer we make our oceans because of burning fossil fuel, it just makes that evaporation happen a lot more easily. And that is fueling these hurricanes. It is helping them intensify more rapidly. And in fact, we're seeing the evidence of it because going back to 2001, the number of hurricanes which have rapidly intensified has more than doubled since 2001, Ellison.
Okay, so your piece cited a few different studies. Help us peek behind the curtain on those. How do scientists actually make these calculations? Is it a computer system? Is it being out in the field, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of think of it like a weather forecast, but in reverse. So they create these algorithms, they create a model, they get it reviewed by other scientists to say, yeah, this checks out, this is solid. And then they go back and they basically remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to make our planet a little bit cooler like it would have been before the Industrial Revolution. And then they simulate the same hurricane to see what happens. And in many cases, Ellison, we're seeing that these storms are much weaker, the winds aren't as strong, and they're dropping a lot less rain. And so that's the way they're able to see that, hey, climate change is really making a big impact, and not in a good way when it comes to hurricanes.
Fascinating stuff. Chase Kane, thank you for making us smarter. We really appreciate it.
Of course.
We're going to turn now to the campaign trail because both former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris visited battleground states today. Let's start with Trump, who had quite the day hitting 2 states. Trump just wrapped up a town hall in North Carolina where he took questions from supporters and criticized the Biden administration's response to Helene yet again. But But he started his day in Georgia, surveying the damage from Hurricane Helene alongside Governor Brian Kemp, the Republican governor Trump heavily criticized at a rally in Atlanta back in August. All of this as the former president prepares to hold a high-profile rally at the very place where an assassin almost took his life in July. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez is in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and joins us now. Gabe, this is Trump's third visit to North Carolina in about 2 weeks, but his first since the storm. He is saying that he's going to be back next week as well. As we mentioned, he was in Georgia. Both of these states dealing with the impacts of Helene and also major political battlegrounds. Has Helene changed Trump's campaign strategy in these states?
Well, Ellison, this state is absolutely crucial for the Trump campaign. As you said, he's visited now several times just within the past few weeks, and he's really seizing on that message of what he sees as a botched federal response to Hurricane Helene. Also, one of his talking points that I keep saying over and over again without evidence is that money for FEMA has been given to undocumented immigrants. The Biden administration says that's simply not true. The White House, the Department of Homeland Security pushing back hard on that. But he delivered that message here to the crowd behind me. As you said, this town hall wrapped up a short time ago. Now, if we look at the average of polls recently, you can really see just how key North Carolina is. It is very close here, and also in a bunch of the other swing states. You just see right there, Arizona and Georgia, Trump up slightly, but again, all of these within the margin of error. And there's that blue wall for Kamala Harris, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. But there you see North Carolina is tied at this point. We spoke with some Trump supporters earlier today about what they think about the response to Hurricane Helene in the western part of the state, of course. Let's listen to what one of them had to say.
And if you listen to Mayorkas the other day, we don't have any money left in FEMA's fund because he paid it so that they could have a place to live. Now our folks over in the western part of the state, there's no money for them. They sent them a meager $750.
And Allison, that is something that the Trump campaign is doing more and more just within the past few days, trying to link the issue of immigration to the federal response to Hurricane Helene. Again, former President Trump making a lot of those claims without evidence, but there is a lot of anger and frustration in this state about what many Trump supporters do see as a weak federal response to the western part of the state. And so the Trump campaign looking to capitalize on that with just a few weeks left in this election, Allison.
And Gabe, the wife of Corey Comparatore, the man who was killed during the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, spoke to the BBC today, her first time speaking publicly, and she said she is furious about the security failures that day. Trump is returning to Butler tomorrow with some high-profile surrogates, right? Could you tell us what we expect to see there, particularly in terms of security?
Yeah, we're hearing a lot of that frustration among, several Trump allies regarding the Secret Service response. Just a few days ago, we heard from former First Lady Melania Trump about just that topic. But yes, tomorrow, former President Trump heading back to Butler for the first time, and what's expected to be an extremely symbolic appearance of billionaire Elon Musk is expected to be at that rally. The former president also mentioned that just a few moments ago here at this town hall. But certainly, this is something that we're seeing over and over again at these Trump rallies within the past few weeks, that iconic image of the former president raising his fist after that assassination attempt. And that is something, that imagery, and it's something that the Trump campaign really wants to hit home, especially for the swing state crowd. In Pennsylvania, another crucial swing state, arguably the most important swing state, they're hoping to hammer that message over the next few weeks, Allison.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez, thank you. And Democrats, they had a very busy day as well. Vice President Harris, she was in Flint, Michigan. She held a campaign rally at the same venue where Trump held a town hall back in September. Basketball icon and Michigan native Magic Johnson joined Harris on the trail just a month after officially endorsing her campaign. Over in Washington, Harris's boss, President Biden, surprising reporters in the White House briefing room. He took questions from the press corps and weighed in on the upcoming transfer of power.
I'm confident it'll be free and fair. I don't know whether it will be peaceful. The things that Trump has said and the things that he said last time out, when he didn't like the outcome of the election, were very dangerous. They haven't even accepted the outcome of the last election. So I'm concerned about what they're going to do.
All this as former President Barack Obama is expected to start campaigning for Harris next week, hitting battleground states in the lead up to Election Day. NBC's Garrett Hake has more on how the final 32 days could play out. Garrett?
Ellison, a busy day for the Democratic candidate here in must-win Michigan, where she started the day really trying to shore up problems she has with a couple of constituencies that she's going to need to hold on to Michigan. This morning, heavily focused on labor at a firehouse today, going after Donald Trump aggressively, saying that essentially he's lied about his support for organized labor, that he's been bad for business, bad for labor, would be bad for Michigan if given a second shot. At this event here today, we heard from one of her key endorsers in this state, Magic Johnson, of course, a star in Michigan State, grew up in the Detroit area. We tried to address one of those other weaknesses, which is with African-American men, urging black women, in many cases, to make sure that the men in their life get out and vote for Kamala Harris. Donald Trump did poorly with African-American voters in 2020. He only got about 8% of the vote, but by their own modeling, if he gets 10, 15% of the vote, he could be president of the United States. The Harris campaign knows they've got to do better with that core group. Magic Johnson made the point to speak to them today. And then there's this third key group, which is Arab and Muslim voters. Michigan has more of those than any other state by percentage. They're a big focused constituency here, and Harris herself met with several Arab and Muslim leaders, including the Muslim group Engage, before this event here tonight. They released a statement talking about the importance of this meeting, lobbying Harris to continue her work to bring the war in Gaza to a close or to a ceasefire. All of these groups will be important for Democrats trying to sew back together their coalition that delivered this state in 2020. They'll need it again in 2024. And already here, voters have ballots in their hands if they requested absentee or mail ballots, Ellison. So this is very much an active process here in Michigan.
Garrett Hake in Michigan, thank you. Don't go anywhere because we are just getting started on Stay Tuned. Up next, the jobs report blows away expectations. NBC's Brian Chung is here to break it all down. Plus, we're coming up on 1 year since that deadly Hamas attack in Israel on October 7th. How the Middle East is marking the day while Jewish communities around the world experience heightened security during the high holidays. And Solar Solution, how a community in the Arizona desert is using the power of the sun to create electricity and save water at the same time. That is in tonight's Future of Everything.
This has never been done in North America before, never been done in the Western Hemisphere. So this could be a new paradigm for irrigation in the Western United States.
Welcome back. Here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. A former Las Vegas councilwoman found guilty of a wire fraud scheme where she defrauded donors. Michelle Fiore claimed she was raising funds to honor police officers who died in the line of duty, but she ended up spending that money on things like rent and payments to her own family members. Her sentencing is scheduled for early next year. She could face up to 20 years behind bars. California is confirming 2 new cases of bird flu. It brings the total up to 16 cases this year. The CDC says both of those people had contact with already infected dairy cows. The 2 cases were separate. Both people are expected to be okay. The Supreme Court is declining to block some Biden administration rules on global warming. They're leaving in place the regulations aimed at curbing oil and gas emissions of methane. The court also rejected a bid to block regulations aimed at curbing mercury emissions. The decisions now mean litigation against the EPA can continue in lower courts. Spirit Airlines may be filing for bankruptcy. The airline reportedly has more than $1 billion in debt that is due in less than a year. All of this comes after its proposed merger with JetBlue was shot down over fears it would reduce competition in the industry. The budget carrier recently cut dozens of its routes for the coming months. And Waymo is expanding its automatic taxi service with Hyundai. They're going to use one of its electric car models mixed with Waymo's self-driving technology. Waymo is the only commercial robo-taxi operator in the United States, providing more than 100,000 rides every week. They're going to start testing those Hyundais late next year. Big economic news today. New data shows that 254,000 jobs were added last month. President Biden taking a victory lap after those numbers were announced by the Department of Labor. Listen.
All the money I was authorized to spend by the Congress has gone to gone to hiring American workers and using American products. We were told that was going to be a big problem, but it's working.
NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung joins us now. Brian, take us through these numbers. Is this what economists were expecting?
Yeah, Ellison, broadly speaking, this jobs report shows that this economy is firing on all cylinders, at least on the jobs market front. As you mentioned, 254,000 jobs added in the month of September. Wall Street economists were only projecting something like 150,000. And it's actually above trend from some of the summer months where we saw job gains between 100 to 150,000 broadly. Now, what was also interesting about this was that it was basically happening in every industry in this country. When you talk about leisure and hospitality, bars and restaurants adding almost 80,000 jobs. You also have construction jobs. We saw more than 20,000 payrolls added in the month in that particular sector. To put it in the words of Bank of America, if you were to try to give this jobs market a scorecard, it was an A+. So that's probably the reason why we heard from the president earlier today, who made his first appearance in the briefing room, basically trying to tout the strength of this economy, which by all standards is really rocking it right now.
Okay, so A+ on the jobs front. Does that mean, big picture, that the U.S. economy has avoided a recession?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was messaging with an economist earlier this morning who told me that the jobs number this morning basically messaged to him that it looks like we are comfortably clear of a recession. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because there were concerns when inflation was peaking at around 9% in the summer of 2022 that the cost of getting inflation down through higher interest rates, thanks to the central bank, the Federal Reserve, might also come at the cost of a rising unemployment rate. And indeed, we have seen the unemployment rate tick up a little bit from 3.5% to 4.1% now. But by all standards, 4.1% is still historically low. So really right now, what we've seen is unemployment staying low. The inflation rate has come down from 9% to about 2.5% as of August. That looks pretty good for right now. Reasons why economists are saying, you know what, this could have been a lot worse, but it looks like we've avoided a recession.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Talk to us before you go about that dock workers strike. I mean, a lot of retail groups, they were worried just over the weekend, saying this is going to really disrupt the supply chain. It didn't last as long as expected, or I guess as feared. But did we see any impacts, or should we prepare to see any impacts to the supply chain?
Yeah, the developments overnight, where it appears that now we've avoided any sort of strike for right now because it's been kicked off to January 15th. Well, that's certainly welcome news, but obviously it's been a number of days that you had all of these major through points on the East Coast that weren't able to take shipments in. Now, what is the cost of that? We'll have to see how economists tally it up, because this is relatively recent news on this resolution. But on the jobs front, it is interesting to note, well, this jobs report that we got today would not have covered the period during which the strike happened. It's not going to be until the next jobs report covering the month of October where we'll see any potential impact of that. Not only is there the dock strike, but there's also the hurricane, right? You can imagine a lot of people not at work because of that natural disaster. And then you also have the Boeing standoff with 33,000 workers in the Pacific Northwest on strike. That could be a bad jobs report, which would happen in October, but we won't get the report of that until just a few days before the election. That's going to be a very interesting political threat to follow about 4 weeks from now, Allison.
Brian Chung, thank you. Tesla's Cybertruck is now facing its 5th recall since customer deliveries started about a year ago. The latest problem, the rearview mirror camera feed. NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello has more.
Forget a Lamborghini or a Ferrari.
It drives great, man. It drives awesome. That's why I love it.
This is the most eye-catching vehicle you'll see on America's roads today. Love it or hate it, Tesla's Cybertruck, described by CEO Elon Musk as what Blade Runner would have driven, is the latest status symbol on 4 wheels. With stars from Kim Kardashian to Pharrell, Lady Gaga, all getting behind the wheel. What's the appeal?
As ridiculous as the Cybertruck may look, it gives it a definite cool factor.
The Cybertruck was first introduced as a futuristic concept car back in 2019. It hit the road late last year, but a string of safety issues led to 5 recalls in just 1 year. The latest, a problem with the rear view camera, which, according to safety officials, took up to 8 seconds to boot up once it shifted into reverse. For context, the government says that needs to happen within 2 seconds. The recall notice says the delay could increase the risk of a collision. The other recalls, failing windshield wipers, hard to read warning lights, parts literally falling off, And then the issue with the car's accelerator.
This slid up.
A viral video shows the pedal can get stuck to the floor once it's pushed all the way down. Tesla markets the Cybertruck as a total workhorse, competing against the likes of other major brand pickups. Tesla even boasts a towing capacity, the equivalent, it says, of an average African elephant. But some experts say this isn't the truck you want to show up in to a job site.
I can't see many construction workers swapping their F-150s or their Silverados or their Rams for a Cybertruck, unless you want to make a big statement.
This latest recall over the rear-view camera now resolved, Tesla says, via a software update sent out to nearly 30,000 Cybertruck owners. We asked Tesla about these safety issues, but haven't heard back. But while the Cybertruck might be great at turning heads, some experts say that's all it's good for.
Does the world need a Cybertruck? No. Would it be a more boring place without it? Probably.
Tom Costello, NBC News, Washington.
Coming up, severe flooding in Thailand, even forcing elephants to run to safety. The urgent rush to evacuate hundreds of the largest living land animal caught on camera. But first, you've got to see this. Spooky season is already making Swifties' wildest dreams come true. A New Orleans house known for its iconic display of Halloween skeletons is entering its Scaras tour era. See what we did there? They are paying homage to Taylor Swift and all of her eras. That includes Reputation and Red. The St. Charles Skeleton House draws crowds every year for their elaborate display, and fans are hoping Swift herself might stop by because she is performing in New Orleans at the end of the month. And if you were wondering, yes, there is a skeleton of Mr. Swiftie himself. This one goes by the name of Travis Skelce. So maybe your husband's will go with you. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world. Russian authorities are struggling to contain fires at oil depots after a series of Ukrainian overnight drone attacks. Blazes were reported in multiple regions where air defenses intercepted several drones. Falling debris sparked a fire at an oil storage facility, which was quickly extinguished. Ukraine has ramped up its drone campaign, increasingly targeting key Russian energy assets. Boris Johnson claims a listening device was found in his bathroom after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited the British Foreign Office back in 2017. In Johnson's new book, Unleashed, he says the bug was discovered during a routine sweep following Netanyahu's visit. Israeli officials have yet to comment. Mexican soldiers seemingly opened fire on a truck carrying migrants near the Guatemalan border, killing at least 6 people from Egypt, Peru, and Honduras. The incident took place on President Claudia Sheinbaum's first day in office and is now under investigation. The 2 soldiers involved have been detained for questioning, but officials say no charges have been filed yet. And in Thailand, an elephant sanctuary in Bangkok had to evacuate nearly 100 elephants today after flash floods hit the area. According to the sanctuary, some of the elephants were swept away by rushing water. 2 of them are unaccounted for, and 9 others remain trapped inside that sanctuary. As the anniversary of the horrific attack on October 7th approaches, nearly 100 hostages taken that day are still believed to be in Gaza. For the families of those hostages, this past year has been a nightmare of uncertainty. NBC's Raf Sanchez spent time with one family who is still waiting to learn about the fate of their father.
In those playful hours after school and before dinner, Avital Dekelhan and her young daughters wait for their dad to come home. They've been waiting for 364 days.
And we miss him so much. My daughter is asking about him every single day.
36-year-old Sagi Dekelhan is a hostage in Gaza, one of 101 still held captive after being kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th. Among them, 7 Americans, 3 confirmed dead, Sagi among those thought to be alive, and the only one with young children.
Wow.
3-year-old Gali asks about her dad, but the hardest questions come from Bar, who's 7.
Where is my daddy? Mom, why is not come back? Why dad is not here to celebrate a birthday?
And what do you tell your daughters?
My heart is broke, but I need to be strong. So I tell them, I hope that is okay. We don't know, but I hope.
Sagi grew up between Israel and Boston, a Red Sox fanatic who played center field for Israel's junior national team. He and Avital, high school sweethearts, together for 20 years. Raising their children in Nir Oz, a kibbutz 2 miles from Gaza. And one of the first communities overrun by Hamas on October 7th. Sagi went out to defend the kibbutz. It was the last time Avital saw him. For the next 10 hours, with terrorists going house to house, she sheltered their children in a safe room.
And I said to my daughter, please be quiet. And she asked me, Gaza in my house? Daddy is dead?
When they were finally rescued, Bar narrated this video. We're very worried about our dad, she says. And through it all, Avital in the final months of pregnancy. In December, she gave birth to their 3rd child, Shahar, Hebrew for dawn. Today, Shahar is 10 months old. Her father has missed every moment of her short life. Never held her or seen her smile.
I can't wait for them to meet. Really, it's every day I wait for this. That's why my wish.
Sagi may not know his family survived October 7th. Avital texts her husband updates about the kids, knowing he can't read them.
I do it for Sagi. I write for him what I feel and what I want to tell him.
How much I miss you, Sag. Even after 10 months, it feels like the first day. Last Thanksgiving, a brief ceasefire led to the release of 105 hostages.
And I remember how Bar, she so cried. Why not? Why not? Why not my daddy?
But the deal did offer a glimmer of hope. Freed hostages said they'd seen Sagi in a tunnel in November, wounded but alive.
And you feel in your heart he's still alive?
Yes, yes. Almost every day I go to sleep and I dream about Sagi, and we meet in dream and we talk about everything. I feel Sagi is alive and we must do everything to bring him home.
Raf Sanchez, NBC News, Kiryat Gat, Israel.
Meanwhile, Homeland Security and the FBI say there may be an increased threat of violence here in the U.S., specifically against Jewish, Muslim, or Arab institutions. NBC's Gary Grumbach spoke with one organization monitoring threats against the Jewish community across the nation.
In New York City, the NYPD stepping up patrols around synagogues as the Jewish high holidays are underway, just days ahead of the anniversary of the October 7th attacks in Israel.
You're going to see our heavy weapons teams out there. We are not hiding the fact that we want you to see us.
In Chicago, acts of anti-Semitism are nothing new for Alderwoman Deborah Silverstein, the only Jewish member of the city council, who recounted flyers that appeared across the city earlier this year.
Some said Jews control the media, Jews are responsible for COVID, Jews blew up the Twin Towers. Very scary stuff.
Chicago police confirming an uptick in anti-Jewish hate crimes.
I was like, enough is enough. We have to get down to the bottom of it.
Getting to the bottom of it is where the nonprofit Secure Community Network comes in. Out of a control center in Chicago, SCN works to protect the more than 7.5 million members of the Jewish community nationwide by tracking threats against them, led by CEO Michael Masters.
We are facing the most complex and dynamic threat environment that has ever faced the Jewish community or the United States in the nation's history.
With direct lines to the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and state and local law enforcement agencies, this 24/7 operation scrapes data from 18,000 sources, everything from social media to the dark web to utilities. If it impacts the Jewish community, whether it's an active shooter, vandalism, or even a weather event, it's all tracked by analysts here in this room. While we were on site, the team got an alert.
There's actually a SWAT situation going on, not related to the Jewish community. This is happening within a block or 2 or 3 of a Jewish community center. We want to make sure that the security director there, the Federation, our community partners are aware of it.
Though violent crime is down nationally, the FBI now says anti-Jewish hate crimes rose 63% in 2023, making up 2/3 of all religion-based hate crimes. Masters says the disturbing trend has continued into 2024, due in large part to the war in Israel.
We've seen an alarming trend of the language in the online platforms. Sadly, it gave them a license and it gave them inspiration to say, think, and potentially attempt to act on those things. Our job is to deny them the opportunity.
Rabbi Abraham Kagan says his congregation is safer because of the work of SCN.
SCN definitely provides a security blanket. It lets the community know that someone is watching their back. Because sometimes some of these crimes can go unnoticed. We need to stay hopeful and optimistic and just continue going on with our lives. And not only going on with our lives, increasing in the activities, because you don't beat hate with hate. You beat hate with love, and you beat darkness with light.
Gary Grumbach, NBC News, Chicago, Illinois.
Coming up, college campuses across the country are preparing for a new wave of demonstrations as the war between Israel and Hamas continues. But one group is already facing scrutiny. NBC's Tom Winter sits down with one of the organizers after the break. A grim anniversary just a few days away now. Monday will mark 1 year since Hamas militants carried out attacks in Israel, attacks that killed more than 1,000 people. 97 hostages abducted on October 7th are still believed to be inside of Gaza. Others have been released, exchanged, or been killed inside of Gaza. Israel's war against Hamas, it has plunged the enclave into a dire humanitarian crisis. The death toll inside of Gaza continues to climb. More than 40,000 people have been killed so far. In the United States, college campuses are now preparing for a wave of new demonstrations. NBC's Justice and Intelligence correspondent Tom Winter sat down with the leader of one group helping to organize pro-Palestinian protest, who is now facing congressional scrutiny over their message and methods.
Our people are by your side.
New York, Atlanta, Los Angeles. Campus protests erupting across the country last spring, a response to Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza after the brutal terrorist attacks on October 7th. Hundreds taken hostage and over 1,000 dead, then tens of thousands killed in Gaza and mass destruction. Closer to home, new questions about free speech, extremism, and foreign influence. Not to mention hundreds of arrests and questions from Congress about some of the groups involved. One drawing scrutiny?
There is nothing wrong with being a member of Hamas.
Samadoun, a pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel advocacy group.
These are the people that are on the front lines defending Palestine and fighting for its liberation.
That's Samadoun co-founder and international coordinator Charlotte Cates, taking part in Resistance 101, a webinar held in March by a student group at Columbia University. Samadoun, which means steadfast in Arabic, is banned in Germany and Israel for its vocal support of designated terror groups.
Most of what we do is kind of the activism that you see people do every day in their communities. So that's organizing demonstrations. That's organizing political education events and seminars.
Kate spoke to us remotely from Vancouver, where she was arrested on hate speech charges for defending Hamas's actions on October 7th at a rally.
Long live October 7th!
Samadoun has co-sponsored several protests in the U.S. over the last year, both on campuses and at major events like the DNC. We wanted to get a better sense of what Cates is saying to college students and protesters.
Do you think the Israeli state has a right to exist?
The so-called Israeli state is a settler colony, and it never had a right to exist. There's no such thing as a state's right to exist.
You've supported Hamas's actions on October 7th. Is that accurate?
And when we have spoken about October 7th as a brave, heroic operation, that is something that we stand by 100%.
So you look at the events of October 7th, not only as something that you support, but you also believe that it was justified.
I think that Palestinians fighting for their liberation is an absolute right.
Throughout our almost 2-hour-long interview, Cates called Israel a colonizer or referenced colonialism more than 40 times, including after several questions about the death of Israeli civilians on October 7th.
What do you say to those individuals who were at a concert that did not have a weapon? Was it heroic for that action to take place?
I do think it is heroic that Palestinians broke out of the siege on Gaza. Palestinians have a right to resist, and that what we saw on the 7th of October was a heroic operation designed to achieve the Palestinian people's liberation.
I guess the question is, Where does it end? Do two wrongs make a right?
We're not talking about two wrongs. We're talking about a colonizer, and we're talking about a colonized people fighting for freedom.
Cates has said similar things in her speeches and webinars with students.
And they took an action that they understood is necessary in order to make change.
Members of Congress now asking questions about Samadoun's funding.
How we can make sure we are following the money.
Following the money isn't easy. A U.S.-based nonprofit, Alliance for Global Justice, processes donations on Samadoun's behalf, and tax law doesn't require them to report who is giving Samadoun money. The Alliance for Global Justice didn't respond to our request for comment, but Cates says her organization follows all U.S. laws and regulations. In a letter to the Secretary of the Treasury, House lawmakers have asked for reports on 20 organizations involved in campus protests, including Samadoun, looking into where their money comes from.
How much money, even if it's just a ballpark, would you say Samadoun has raised or you've raised here in North America?
I mean, we've raised thousands of dollars.
Ultimately, the question here is, where's your money coming from? Where are you really getting your support?
Well, one of the things that's really amazing about standing against genocides is that, like, a lot of people want to see the genocide end. There's sometimes this discourse about, like, funding of protests that makes it sound as if, like, having a demonstration requires hundreds of thousands of dollars. No, it just requires, like, hundreds of people that actually care about a cause.
A cause that led Cates to Iran in August, where she accepted a humanitarian award, drawing even more scrutiny. But she told us she's not funded by nor affiliated with Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, or any U.S. designated terrorist organization.
Support can be anything from money to services to personnel.
Laura Burns spent 2 decades at the FBI investigating terror groups.
Certainly there's a component of the protest activity that are individuals who simply want peace. But if you look closely at a number of the activities and the organizations that are involved in these protests and encampments, there is a theme of support for Hamas, which is a designated terrorist organization.
Whether that support violates federal law, something called material support, can be difficult to prove, Burns says, without tax reform.
The laws surrounding tax-exempt organizations' reporting requirements should be enhanced to require more transparency and more accountability.
We asked Cates about questions raised by lawmakers that she and her organization are effectively acting on behalf of U.S. designated terrorist groups.
The concept of material support requires that there's a form of material support. You actually have to, like, provide money or weapons or services to that organization. And that's not what's happening here. We're talking about expressing moral and political support.
There are no known criminal investigations in the U.S. involving Cates or Samadoun. In the midst of the Jewish High Holy Days, and as the anniversary of October 7th approaches, tensions are high. There are Jewish student groups around the country saying they worry about a repeat of last spring. Some protest groups say Congress is unfairly portraying their demonstrations as pro-Hamas when they are calling for peace. And universities and cities, caught in the middle, challenge to balance free speech with public safety. As for Cates, she says her organization will continue to speak out.
Essentially, we're seeing a situation where Palestinian lives are considered nameless, expendable, and pointless, and Israeli lives, even if they are literal soldiers engaging in a colonial war, are considered precious and very important.
What do you all see for October 7th this year, or around that time period?
There's many actions and demonstrations being mobilized. We're going to be out in the streets, and we're going to be mobilized until this ongoing colonial project comes to an end.
That was Tom Winter reporting. Before we go, it is time for the future of everything. An Indigenous American community in Arizona may have just cracked the code on how to produce power and save water in the middle of the desert. Their innovations could help communities everywhere adapt to a warming climate. Plus, a beaver battle in Massachusetts resolved. The fate of Nibby the beaver ending up in the hands of the governor who's given her a permanent home. Your 60 Seconds of Joy is next. Tonight in the future of everything, history is being made this week in the Arizona desert. It's a simple idea that can create electricity and save water at the exact same time. Brad Hicks reports.
With the flip of a switch, a new source started sending power to the grid. This stretch of solar panels south of Phoenix may not seem special, but what's under this canopy could impact how Western communities adapt to warming temperatures and drier weather.
We're meeting the moment here.
The innovators are Indigenous, the Gila River Indian community. They've built this canopy of solar panels over an irrigation canal.
This has never been done in North America before, never been done in the Western Hemisphere. So this could be a new paradigm for irrigation in the Western United States.
The panels produce power, but equally important, they prevent evaporation, a huge problem here in the desert. The shade they create could also keep algae from growing in the canal, cutting maintenance costs. And the cooling effect of the water under the panels should make them more efficient.
For the world to see that a tribal nation can do this. We're at the forefront of this. We're at the cutting edge, of finding ways to address climate change.
Right now, just over a half mile of this canal is covered. But when the 16-mile-long canal is complete, it could supply half the energy needs of the entire community and save enormous amounts of water for irrigation.
Community's vision is to establish the first and only in the world completely carbon neutral irrigation district, meaning that whatever its power demand is, we will generate through renewable energy.
The indigenous people here are considered one of the most successful canal-building cultures in human history, dating back 2,000 years. By harnessing solar to save water, they are taking their canal-building heritage to new heights.
And this links so beautifully to our traditions. If this moment becomes a movement, we're going to look back and just to see that this is a historic time in how we address and adapt to our changing environment.
In the Gila River Indian community, Brad Hicks reporting.
And finally tonight, there's been a beaver battle brewing in Massachusetts. It's centered on this adorable two-year-old beaver named Nibby. So the Massachusetts Wildlife Agency wanted the beaver to return to the wild, but the group that saved her feared she would not survive the winter. A court hearing about Nibby's fate was supposed to take place today, but now it is no longer necessary. NBC News anchor Joe Fryer has your 60 seconds of joy.
Nibby the beaver is a revered rodent.
Nibby, what are you doing, baby girl?
Building dams and a social media following.
Nibby.
The beaver fever started 2 years ago after Nibby was rescued from the side of a road by Jane Newhouse's Wildlife Center. Newhouse wanted Nibby classified as an educational animal so she could take the 30-pound burly beaver to schools and libraries. Instead, the state's wildlife agency said Nibby must return to her natural habitat. Thousands signed a petition supporting Newhouse, with politicians even begging the governor to intervene.
We're getting close to Thanksgiving, right? Maybe she can pardon the beaver instead of a turkey.
And sure enough, late Thursday, Governor Maura Healey declared Nibby will remain at the wildlife facility as an educational beaver.
Oh, my God.
An announcement made during our interview.
How does that feel to hear this news hot off the presses?
Well, you guys are the ones telling me. I can't. Oh, my God.
Nibby, do you have any reaction?
Nibby says, bring more pistachios.
Nibby's probably pretty happy about that. Okay, that does it for us tonight. I'm Ellison Barber. We will see you on Monday, but until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.